Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining our monthly webinar. My name is Mark Wilson, your host for today from Globe. And obviously today we've got Dave Arnold with us from Envu to go through the presentation. So when I hand over to Dave, I'll let him, he can introduce himself for sure. Today we're going to go through sort of termite ID behaviour, sort of treatment selection, and Dave can talk a wee bit about research and development that Envu are carrying out. Obviously, there's been lots of changes at Envu over the last couple of years, so a change of more products on the market and things. So if you've any questions around those things for David, he's happy to answer those at the end as well. Just a couple of slides from me. If I just jump to the next one, David. Just a quick sort of update on the specials. So we had this special running last month for the Bell promotion on the gift card for the fuel, which is kind of, I guess, two things that are quite topical at the moment, fuel and the rodenticides. So we're extending that promotion to next month as well. So that will roll through into next month with the contract and the DieTrack range. So you can find details on the website. We've got details on the stores as well. So yeah, if you spend up to $1,500, you get a $200 fuel card, which might get you maybe half a tank. I'll jump on the next one, Dave. The other promotion we've got for this month is the optical bird gel. So this has been, since we've had this kind of direct distribution on this product, it's been really successful. So we've had a lot of success with this product and been having a better supply as well. It's helped customers be able to place large orders for larger jobs. So we find this to be working in lots of situations where it might be difficult to use spikes or netting. Certainly, it's a good option. So we've got a deal on for next month as well. It'll be 15% off any of the purchases of the unit, either the magnetic or the non-magnetic unit as well. I think that was me, Dave. Was that all my warehouse clearance?
Warehouse.
Yeah, so we've just updated a few more products onto the warehouse clearance list. So if you use the website, if you go to the warehouse clearance, we've always got sort of end of line products and things in there. There's some really good deals. So if you get a chance, have a look at the website on that, and you can obviously buy them directly and put them in your cart as you can with all the other products as well. So if there's anything in there that takes your fancy, please let us know. So without further ado, I'll hand over to David. His presentation will run through the things that he's talking about. We'll do some questions and answers at the end. And was there a promotion, Dave?
There is. So what I'll do is I'll go through a couple of things. Thanks, Mark, for hosting us firstly. We've got a promotion for today. It's basically a lucky door prize. So in the little chat box on your screen, if you can put down your name. So what we'll do at the end is we'll actually draw out a lucky door prize. Because some people today will have multiple people viewing the same computer, rather than having your name from what you've logged in from, you have to put your name in the chat. So we will remind you at the end, but that's the first little bit of business. While I'm doing the intros, is a perfect time to drop that note in. So that's why we thought we'd raise it now. So first of all, bit of an introduction on me. Sorry I'm here today. It's maybe a little bit of a funny connection. I am actually in Darwin today, just following on some of our trial sites, which we'll touch on a little bit today as well. So Envu is a fairly new business. I'm sure more and more of you have seen the branding from Envu. So we are a combination of two businesses now, with some additional ones coming in the future. So about three years and 3 months ago now, we brought in the Bayer professional pest control products under the Envu branding. Through that change, we've maintained a lot of the staff with Daryl, Ken and Wendell as our local territory managers and national sales. Probably almost 12 months ago now, we had the acquisition of FMC, which is where myself, Daniel and Jay have come into the business to help support the growth of the business long term. So from our side as Envu, very focused on you as the professional pest controllers. That is our target market. We are very specialised, and that is what we want to service. A little bit of my background, just to give everyone some confidence and I guess some information on myself. You may have seen my name, but myself, I am a second generation pest controller. I've been in the industry for 22 years, working on the tools in family-based businesses, multinational. I've run my own successful business in Brisbane, and also worked for several multinational chemical manufacturers as well. So a very broad range of knowledge. Within our own business, we focused a lot on termites being our key pest in the Brisbane, Southeast Queensland area, focusing on pre-construction, post-construction, baiting, and a lot of different things within that. So we specialise a lot in heritage buildings and things like that as well, which is very out of the normal. So looking today, we want to just start, this is kind of a two-part presentation because of the amount of detail that's in here. I will have to move through some of it quickly because there is a lot of detail in here. Please, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. If we don't get to cover them off today, please reach out to me or the team, and we will definitely assist you moving forward. So looking firstly, just quickly, just one little slide on our product range. So why are we talking about termites? Mainly because of the products that we have. So with the combination business, we have Cordon and also HomeGuard as our leading pre-construction products. So one obviously being a blanket and then one being a film-based product. So we basically can meet whatever option or solution a builder is chasing. We pretty much have something to solve that issue on those construction fronts. Moving forward to our liquid treatments, so post-construction and pre-construction, we can look at Biflex Aqua, Biflex Ultra, and then as a post-construction option, we can look at Premise in that area as well. So a few options within our suite of products. Just in regards to product branding, you will see everything start to change for the multicolored E and then our product name moving forward. So we are there to support you guys. So if you're having issues or questions with our products, please come back to us at any point. Just touching firstly on HomeGuard and Cordon. So both our products are manufactured in Australia, and that is a big thing that we have with those products. So locally manufactured for our whole HomeGuard range and our whole Cordon range. So it's something that not a lot of people understand and know, but they are both produced locally in Australia. That's exactly the same with our collars on both those products. So what is a pre-construction system? And I guess touching on what we have today, I've put this slide in because there's always a bit of misconception with a pre-construction termite system. So what is it actually designed to do? It's designed to prevent concealed entry of termites into a building. So looking at the photo there, first glance, you could go, oh, has it failed? Well, no, it's done what it's meant to do. So that's why with any physical system, the inspections are very, very critical to ensuring that there's no long-term damage to the property. So in this situation that we're looking at, there could be two things that have happened, whether the termites have hit the footing, come in behind the brickwork, risen up the cavity, hit the actual physical protection, then come out and around it, or vice versa, come up from behind the plumbing penetration following up, remembering that this photo is a little bit out of context. So it is at the base of a plumbing penetration with high moisture. So that is why it's so important with our inspections that we comment on conducive conditions, being moisture, water leaks, and fungal decay. So just be mindful of that when we're looking at those treatment options and recommendations to our customers. So looking at termites, first of all, it's a photo of Shedorhinotermes, and I will break this down as we go through. But one of the main things is we've got the major soldier sitting there in the middle, and the minor soldier is one of the easiest identifying features with Shedorhinotermes. I will break this down a little bit more, so that's not any of the introduction that's there. So looking at termite species that we have, I'm just going to minimize this just so I can see a little bit better. So termites, subterranean termites is what we're talking about today. As a rule of thumb, they tend to travel in the top 300 mil of soil. So that is not the be all and end all. So we need to be mindful when we look at construction and the way properties are built. They will also follow the base of plumbing. So if we look at a plumbing drain, there's always water sitting in the base of that. So a conducive condition for termites is the condensation on the outside of the PVC. Termites will also follow that ground. So as we get close to a property where there's been heavy excavation, they will dive deeper and follow that open ground. So One of the myths and one of the things that we talk about a lot is when we put in termite baiting systems. One of the big things that we start to do is when we disturb that soil, we actually break the microbials in the soil, which is part of the attractant for termites. So be mindful of that. That is one of those things that we will start to come up with when we look at historical properties, where we'll hear the 100-year-old property that sat there has never had termites, never been an issue. They put an extension on the back, start doing work. Part of the process will be to do with that disturbance of the soil, plus potential risks with moisture and drainage that could come in those areas. So just keep that in mind when we consider that. How far will termites forage? The rule of thumb is we tend to say they'll travel about 100 meters from the nest, and that can be a several distance, and that's what we need to be very much aware of, especially when we're looking at newer developments. And remembering the nest is not always going to be something we can see. So a lot of the new construction sites that we look at, they can be a lot of fill that gets put in, and we need to remember what was there before. They could be marshland, it could be a dense forest that was in there. A lot of times things are cut, there's conducive conditions sitting under the ground. So it could be stumps and things like that that are left under the ground. Trees could get pushed over, soils put on top. Where are the termites coming from? The food source that was underneath the ground, not potentially what we can see. So just be mindful that when we look at those properties. So today we're going to look at arboreal and suboral nest species, and we're going to break down into those species and try to understand a little bit of their foraging behaviours and some treatment options with them. I'm not going to go too in depth just because of time, but there is a lot of information we have trapped in our brains, so please come to us afterwards. So Master Timididae are the master termes, normally found in the northern part of Australia. We'll break this down as we go through. Rhino Timididae, Coptotermes, Shedorhinotermes, Heterotermes, and the newest genus of species, Timididae, which is Nasutotermes and Microcerotermes. This becomes important when we start looking at Nasutotermes and how we start to get our control of that termite species, and we'll touch on that as we go forward. So looking firstly, sorry guys, my computer's completely frozen. Sorry about that. So Mastotermes darwinus is the first species we're going to look at. So commonly referred to as the giant termite. They are a multi-nesting species and will bud off in areas. So they are very, very destructive when they take hold. Going back probably 10 plus years ago, I got stung with this species by a colleague who I do a lot of research with about putting a mastoterme between my fingers and seeing if it actually bit. It did, it bit, and it drew blood. So they are very, very aggressive within that termite species. Based on the size, they are about 12.25 mil in length. So they're a fairly large termite based on the size of us Shedorhinotermes that a lot of more of us would be common with. When we look at the workings and galleries with this species, they're very big and very drawn out. So if we kind of look at the Coptotermes, where they're very fluted galleries, can be similar with Mastotermes, but they're very, very large with those galleries because of the size of the termite. That's one thing that we just need to be aware of. Beautiful species to look at. If ever you're in the northern part of Australia, tropical regions, you will tend to find this species nesting and commonly found in and around palm trees or I should say droopy looking trees in areas. So when they tend to move into those trees, they will decimate them very quickly. You hear stories all the time of farmers parking their tractors for too long and this species eating the bottom of the tires out. So it's just something to be aware of. There are pockets where they are found on the Gold Coast, which was actually a transportation issue. So timber was transported to that area, and it's basically on a gated community that they've never really got on top of the infestation there, but it's not something that's flown down there or moved or common in that area. Coptotermes, probably one that we are more commonly come in contact with and see on a more frequent basis. With this species here, when we look north of the tropics, so almost kind of Townsville north, this species will do above ground nests, and we'll touch on the size of those nests to give you a reference point for how large they are. Big thing we need to take away with this species is the size of the colony. So they can have up to 1 million individuals. So why is that important? When we start looking at our stage 1 treatments, how are we getting the active ingredient back to the nest? So two things we've got to remember: 1 million individuals and a colony that could be up to 100 meters from where we're treating the food source. So we need to take that in mind when we're trying to say that we want a treatment or a control done in 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. It can sometimes take longer. Rule of thumb with Coptotermes, I tend to think that above ground baiting is a better option and a more precise to get that initial control, mainly because of the molting period. So this species will molt about every 9 weeks. So when we tend to look at our baiting programs, we can pick that up fairly quickly and get control within a reasonable time frame. So just something different to think about there when we look at this property. A couple of things that I really want to stress with Coptotermes is the way that their leads are set up. So anyone who's ever cut concrete in the past, when you actually cut concrete to have a look at a heavy termite infestation and roll that concrete slab back, you'll see the termite leads, especially with Coptotermes, that sit on that surface. They will also follow the base of plumbing penetrations to enter a property. So this is important when we start pulling together our treatment plan that we have in place. The big thing with those leads, they're very hygroscopic. So what does that mean? We're not getting penetration of liquid into where the termite sits. So if I rush my stage 1 treatment and haven't got control or management of the species to get that lead to start to become brittle that's underneath the concrete slab, when I start to carry out my soil injection, and especially as we're getting further and further apart with our hole spacings, there's less pressure to help move and break that lead to have the active ingredient laying within that lead. What that means is in the future, another termite species that follows that same lead could potentially bypass the treatment we've done in place. So really important with this species to get your stage 1 done properly, inform the customer to slow the process down, get the stage 1 treatment done properly, and get that long-term control. So if that was one thing I'd love everyone to take out of today, that would be it. It is the same for other species, but more importantly with Coptotermes, anyone who's had big problems where the species keep coming back in, quite often it's with Coptotermes. So they are a multi-nester. They will tend to nest in the base of trees. So when we start talking about trees, we talk about doing our spiral drill pattern to check where the nest is in the tree. So rule of thumb, you start at about your knee height and you're drilling up to your mid-chest height in a spiral motion to find that nest. I always loved the grass, so I'd get a long piece of grass, good bit of saliva on it, which sounds horrible, send it down the hole, bit of a twirl. Quite often you'll slide that out and you'll see Coptotermes grabbed hold of the grass and really holding onto that grass stick that's there. So this species itself, when you start going through a property doing your inspections, it's important to understand how they travel in a property. So they will tend to come in a property, travel around, and also find the weaknesses within a property. So this can be a shower base that's got old pegs, holes in it. Could be a plumbing penetration that's got no protection in it. It could be a lounge room. They will send multiple ways that they will get in and out of a property, tending to travel low up to lentil beams. Not normally something that you see a massive amount sitting in a roof void. With this species, they will do a lot of mudding and a controlled environment where they'll start to build up what I like to class as a bivouac point. So it's a food storage area that they're using to break down the cellulose and feed that second colony that's inside the property. So this is normally found around moisture. So really important when we start looking at these, moisture meter is critical to find that moisture. Quite often you'll see it at the base of an air conditioning overflow, so an internal air conditioning unit that sits on a wall. Where that overflow pipe sits, it's normally got a join in it. If that's come apart, you'll get condensation leaking down a wall. It's great for a moisture meter or a thermal camera to pick that up. With the mud packing of Coptotermes, you'll start to see on the plasterboard the dots that start to appear in the actual mudding area. So a few key things to look at when you're looking at that species, but control of the initial infestation is the most important thing with this species. Shedderinotermes, something that we're very common with. I always throw something in here and everyone looks at me strange and I'll throw it in here again. Luckily, I've been backed up by a few people that I've worked with who have said that I can actually do this. When we used to walk into properties, we would get a smell and I'd go, oh, there's Shedderinotermes in that garden. Or even when we're trenching soil, I'd go, oh, there's a really strong smell. Once we'd start looking a little bit more, we'd see these Shedderinotermes sitting in the area. So if you think of a eucalyptus leaf and crush up that leaf, you get that really, really sweet smell. And that's what you tend to get with this species. Key identifying features is the major and minor soldier that I showed you before. You can see the head shapes are slightly different, and they're very easy to identify from that at those points. Colonies around suburbia tend to be around the base of a golden cane, things like that, where it's drawing the moisture in, and you're not always going to find it within those suburban areas. So just be mindful of that as well. Is that you, Mark?
No.
That was me, Dave.
Something
Sorry,
like-
you're totally right about that smell. Just giving you a thumbs up.
Thanks, mate. So just working through with this species, a couple of things that we need to be mindful of, a little bit different with their colony makeup. So when we were talking before about Coptotermes, which I went off track a little bit with their baiting, 6 to 9 weeks is about that time for the molting. When we look at Chedorhinotermes, it can be up to 9 months to get feeding to get to that point where we get control. So imagine that in a customer's house that you're going back every 4 to 6 weeks going, hey, I think we're getting there. I think we're getting close. The customer starts to get that little bit of doubt. I personally, because Chedorhinotermes is a slightly larger termite, that transfer with an active ingredient with the carry, whether it is a dust or a foam, tends to be a lot greater, and you've got to get a lot better results when you look at that in those areas. So just be mindful of that. The workings can be quite brittle and especially the mudding is quite brittle. So just be mindful of that with this species as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview in that. We're going to look at some termite nests now. So what's important to remember? What are we looking at? So the first nest on the left-hand side is myself for reference, standing next to a Coptotermes mound. So north of the tropic, that is the size and the nest that we're looking at in those areas. So I want you all to take a mind shot of that and think of that in a suburban area, but under the ground. So when we look at a house and we're trying to put, I'll just say 2 grams of dust or half a can of foam in an area, we're trying to make sure that that active ingredient goes back to a nest of that size. Is it always possible? I don't think so. And that's why I raised that question. So the really important thing when we look at our stage 1 treatments is 2 things we're trying to do, and recommendations are really critical at this point. So when we're doing our stage 1, we're trying to remove the termites from the property to put in a termite management system to stop the reinfestation of that site. So we're not always going to get this full magical colony control from a dust or a foam or even a bait for that point. So just be mindful of that in those situations. Baits were a lot more closer to that success. A lot of times we'll see a suppression of the nest. It might be 2 years and that colony builds back up and then they start reinfesting those sites again. So you'll see it a lot with Microcerotermes and Heterotermes when you start dealing with them more. You'll kind of see this suppression when it's normally about every 12 months, they come back into the property. So just be mindful of that process as we start looking through it. So central here are 2 of our grass feeding species. So we got a magnetic mound and a Pseudotermes mound here as well. Very much grass feeders. So when you break open these termite mounds, both of these photos are North Queensland or even Darwin for that point. The termites hold a lot of that grass within it. So a big thing that's slightly different, and we've had these questions from farmers. I've got termite mounds, and you'll see it a lot with the kind of smaller ones that almost look like a witch's hat. Is that damaging my grass? And is my grass getting competed for the cattle that I'm trying to feed off the land? We actually did a trial with this, and surprisingly, it was more important to leave the termites there because they help to aerate the soil. So part of that rejuvenation of the grass, it was a really important factor to see that in those areas. So not every nest that we see is going to be a subterranean termite that we need to manage in some way. They are a really important thing of the ecosystem. So looking here on the top right, Pseudotermes walkeri will tend to do that really, really dark black nest up in the tree and really thick black leaves that will enter that area. We'll touch on that a little bit more. When we go down to Microcerotermes, we tend to see these water droplets or a little crystallization that starts to form on the base of the nest. So this here is actually a leaking toilet. Sorry, I've clicked on the thing. This is actually a leaking toilet that was behind here where the Microcerotermes had gone up the concrete post into the bathroom and then done a nest because of the moisture that was there. Not very common, but that is what you're going to see. Heterotermes on the other side, they will tend to do, it's almost like a soccer ball that tends to sit on the top of a fence post, something like that in those areas. And these will change with the areas where you guys are operating. So just be mindful of that for where you're located in Australia. Nasutotermes. So I'm going to talk a little bit more on Nasutotermes walkeri, mainly because of my experience with them and what we kind of deal with their habits. So first of all, newest genus of species. Identifying feature is a perfect with this is the rhinoceros termite. So basically the point on the top of the head. Couple of things with this. When we look at control and doing our treatments, we don't always get that great transfer with the active ingredient. So when we look at Nasutotermes, anyone who's ever sprayed the external lead of a tree, you come back and you start breaking that open, you start seeing the clumping of all the termites in that area. They don't actually cannibalize each other. So that's why you get the dead soldiers and workers that build up in those leads. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit more because it's important. My big thing with this is I believe that they are mound and arboreal nest species. Depending on where we are, they are a lot of ground species that we tend to see. So when you're out heading west of Brisbane, you'll see the big mounds on the side of the highway as you start to head out toward Ipswich. They are Nasutotermes and they're a grass species. So not what we're talking about with walkeri, but slightly different again. When we look at the control of this species, this is where we've got to be really critical with understanding how they work. Sunshine Coast, they're very prolific in that really sandier soil. We tend to have a lot of issues with Nasutotermes. So a couple of experiences I've had with them. One was a customer who we'd done an inspection. There was a nest out on the power pole directly outside. He said, it's all good. It's been there for years. Not worried about it. Energex came through to replace the pole, cut the pole down. Within, I think it was about 48 hours, that nest had moved up in his lounge room and right up on the ceiling. So it makes me believe, and there's a few instances I've had with this, that we've got the above ground nest that we can see, and there's also a nest in the base of the tree. I'm a big believer on that. It's not proven. It's just a theory that I have, and I've seen it multiple times. A second one that I've had with this species, so slightly different again, with that really, really dark coloured mudding. We had a property that we'd done a chemical treatment around, lifted pavers, full chemical treatment, put pavers back. We got a call about 5 months later, following some heavy rain, that there was a termite lead up the outside of the property. Didn't mean that the product failed. We went out and had a look straight away to identify what had happened. They backed onto a heavy bushland that we couldn't treat any of the termite species in that nest, in that council area. What had actually happened is one of the limbs had fallen off the tree. So the termites had actually started to find a new place. What they'd done is travelled about 10 metres across the top of the pavers and gone straight up the outside wall of the property. Had the product failed? No. It was just an issue of circumstances that led us to that point. So one thing that we tended to do after that was one of our learnings was put bait boxes. So your aggregation boxes, your really large aggregation boxes along a fence line to intersect those termites early and control them within those areas. So this species, I tend to think a dust is a better option with this species because you get that flowability and they will pick up the active ingredient and travel it more so than a liquid. So that's my opinion on this. Take that as you will. A lot of the times with this species, when they're inside a property, they tend to rise. So normally it'll be in a roof void. You'll see a lot of black dark mudding. When you're up in a roof void, it is remembering that intersection. So your top plate and your plasterboard, and even where your corner sits, you'll see the mudding in those sections. So just be mindful to really have a good look in those areas. If there's insulation, spend the time, peel it back, and make sure you do a thorough inspection on those areas. Heterotermes, one of our smaller species, so 4.75 mil. When we look at this species, we're seeing more and more instances where they're coming into properties itself. This species tends to hunt a lot more for that decayed timber, that moisture damaged timber, and those kind of things. So be very mindful of moisture. It's really important when this species is close. And I still don't think just spot treating a nest with no protection to the house is the right option with this species. Sometimes their nests can be quite hard to find. They can be sitting in a rock retaining wall, not always visual in those areas. So personally, I tend to stay away from spot treating these in and around a suburban area. And I prefer to do that knowing that there's a treatment on the property. Then we will spot treat to reduce the risk. But it would never be my first option to start spot treating these areas. When we start looking at their intersection into a property, it tends to be low. They love to eat out bottom plates very heavily, very quickly, and more so around that moisture damaged area. When I was talking before with coptotermes, heterotermy is very similar, where they will start to eat the plasterboard itself. So when you start looking at the mudding, and this is where a really good torch comes into play, you want a wide beam. So on your torches, push it back a wide beam parallel to the plasterboard, so you actually have a nice beam spreading across the plasterboard. Heterotermies, you tend to see it almost looks like a lightning strike. So you see that kind of wavy pattern that kind of comes out from a skirting board. You might have 4 or 5 kind of waves that come out. You'll start to see that the mudding has white speckling in it from the plasterboard they're moving through. So once again, with this species, we need to remember very, very small colonies. So we can be talking a couple of thousand individuals, 10,000 individuals in some situations. So it's very, very small colonies. When we look at starting our treatment, when we've got such small colonies, and even more so when we've got less activity inside, it's more important to make sure we get our active ingredient to that species. So when we say that, and this is where your, I guess, experience starts to come in, based on what I was saying before, where most of the damage tends to be in the bottom plate. When we look at doing a foaming or a dusting treatment, we're not going to get much activity or much movement or contact with our insecticide or pesticide on that area. So if we're trying to break open a little bit of mudding to get some dust flow, we're not going to have a lot of termites moving through that area. Where are the termites sitting? So remember to think like the pest so we can get our active ingredient to that area. So the bottom plate is the key. So a couple of areas we're going to have when we start looking at our treatments. We've got the skirting board grip strip. So if we pull back the carpet, you'll have that area that sits between the grip strip and the skirting board. So it's normally a pretty good section where we can get a high activity, and you'll normally find a lot of shadows moving in that area. Coptos will to a certain point as well. Where the skirting board sits, so it sits against the plasterboard, it is concave to a certain point. So it's a good area where we can get some flowability of a dust or a foam in that area. More importantly, and this is where the education and discussion comes with the client, if we know that termite damage is there and it's likely that they're going to have to do repairs, think about where the termites actually are. So they're in that bottom plate. So my rule of thumb was a 3 or 4 mil drill bit. We would basically get to the point and side onto a building. We would sort of drill on a 45 degree and try to drill into that bottom plate. So remembering if the bottom plate sits behind, the area of termite activity is going to be on the base. So where that bottom plate is, it's concaved on the bottom where the moisture membrane sits, or the DPC sits in that area, or potentially the plastic. That's where the moisture is going to hold. So we need to get into that section to get the treatment to where the activity is. So try to think about that in these areas. Personally, I think heterotermies are probably one of the hardest to actually control, mainly because of the colony structures. So I've had issues where we've had properties that we've gone back to multiple times, retreated chemical barriers multiple times to try to find out where they were getting in. So this species, as we were saying with coptotermes, will enter, will also go under and come back up, or potentially run through a property and go back down a weakness. So I've had instances where this species has found unprotected plumbing penetrations. Prime one is always a bath under a bathtub with a 90s built property where they used to put a bucket and the plumbing penetration just sat there. It's open underneath that area. Same with the step down shower bases for the 80s, 90s built properties where the star pickets were, or where the timber pegs were to hold the formwork. That starts to get eaten out by termites, allowing easy concealed entry. I have had issues in one property in particular where they'd actually come up through a cyclone rod. So when the apprentice, I'm assuming it was an apprentice, I'm hoping it was an apprentice, not the qualified builder, was drilling through the actual footing to put in the cyclone rod, actually punched through the slab. as that cyclone rod had rattled and moved around, the termites were actually using that as their entry point. So putting our chemical in this situation, it was never controlling where the entry point was for the termites. So just try to think about that when we get to these situations where we're saying a treatment hasn't worked. We need to look at the construction to understand why that hasn't worked in that situation. Looking at microcerotermes, so slightly different again, 5.2 million long. They have the slight serrated edge on the mandibles, which you can only really see when you look at it under a microscope. So really important with this species, make sure that you are carrying a microscope. They will move very similar to heterotermes. We don't see a lot in properties, but you will sometimes see it in those cases. Just in mindful of time, I'm going to move through this a little bit quicker, just so you guys aren't held up for too much longer. So just touching a little bit on our research and development. It's a big part of our business. It is partly my role. So in tech services, looking after Australia, New Zealand, this is what we're doing. So as I mentioned before, I am in Darwin at the moment. We've just carried out 2 days of trial site work up here in Darwin. And I guess when we look at our 2 products, we're one of the few companies that can stand behind the fact that HomeGuard and Cordon have 23 and 24 years of in-field trial data on them. So their trials are still going to date. They're not just accelerated trials that we've got rid of. So that is the big push that we have with this species as well. So it is great that we can do that as a company. Running these trials for an extended period has a lot of cost, but it's more about the value for you guys. I personally don't think we talk about this enough. Hence the reason I've put it in here to give you a bit of background on what we do in the field, give you some trust on what we have with our product range. So when we look at the likes of Biflex, over 30 years that it's been in the field, tested. We've got millions of homes protected with Biflex Ultra for termites. And it is a very, very good barrier treatment in that way where termites will not go through it. Has some massive benefits when we look at mobility in soil and that it stays where we put it for a prolonged period. And we'll touch on that a little bit. So when we look at bifenthrin as the active ingredient, that's why it was chosen to go into HomeGuard as a sheet material. So HomeGuard as a product, we have 3 thicknesses of sheet material plus a lot of support products. One of the beauty with our support products that we have with the HomeGuard range, so our GT, Termiflex, Protector Coat, they are all supported and approved to be supporting of the Cordon management system as well. So both those products will support each other and complement to allow you guys on site to solve the problems. So it's fine for us to get this, what we have here, and I'll explain that in a second, but it's more important to be able to overcome those construction issues at that point when a process is being built. So that's one of the beauties that we have with that. If you'd like more information, reach out to me or the team. We're happy to help you. So looking at what you're looking at in front of you here, so we have three plots. So all of our plots are pretty much done the same. And I'll show you this as we go forward a bit more of an in-depth into what these are. So looking at what you're looking at in front of you, it's a concrete slab that sits there. At the top, we've actually got a core that's put through. And I think from memory, it's about a 50 mil PVC pipe that sits in there. So to simulate a penetration in a slab. The bottom of that pipe actually has a gauze put on it. So it's actually a stainless steel mesh. We put a Tassie oak timber in the center of that and put a cap on it. So it's when it sits down, the mesh is actually touching the ground, which is actually laid and sits directly on top of pine, radiata pine. So you can see from the mudding from the middle trial there's 4 sticks of pine that have sat underneath that, and that feeds directly out to a nest to show that interaction with the sheeting material itself. So a little bit different. All of our trial sites up here, so Townsville and Darwin, these trials actually sit in the ground. So very different to what we're seeing in a property, and this gives us some confidence. So basically this material is sitting probably 20 mil underneath soil, but completely embedded in soil all year round. These trial sites go underwater 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a year. And I'm not talking just sitting underwater. The Townsville site probably cops about 3 meters of rain per year. So it's a very, very wet environment, very extreme temperatures with hot and cold. And that's where we start to look at trialing these products. So looking at what you're looking in front of you, the trial on the left-hand side is master termes interacting with the HomeGuard sheeting. So first of all, I go, wow, what's happened? Beautiful thing is that the one on the left is an untreated. So the one that's completely covered in termite mudding, they sit in plots. So they basically sit next to each other, and that's how we can test each one that we have. So we've got a untreated, a 0.5%, and a 1%. All of them showing no access when we look at the treated, that there's been no access in past the HomeGuard treatment in that area. So looking here at the photo on the right hand side, depending on how big your screen is, you may or may not be able to see that. There is a piece of cloth tape just to the top side of where that master terme sits. So what basically has happened is when we've turned it over, there is master termes already interacting with the HomeGuard sheet. So what they've basically done is they don't want to come in contact with the HomeGuard. They're sitting on top of the termite mudding and trying to stay away and stay on the tape to avoid the repellency from that nature of the HomeGuard sheet. So two products are slightly different. We've got HomeGuard, which is an impregnated. So what that basically means is that the bifenthrin and the plastic are put together in the manufacturing process, so it's consistent through the whole product that sits there. Cordon's slightly different. So it's a tri product with a blanket. We basically have two sheets of plastic and a fabric material in the middle, which is sprayed with a deltamethrin. So that's where they're slightly different. Some builders will prefer the compression nature with cordon, where some will prefer the film with the HomeGuard. For us, we're here to support either way. And it's pretty much down to a builder preference. We can help on either side moving forward. So to give you a bit more confidence on what's here, I want to go through these trial sites. So these are our Townsville trial sites with cordon. So to the right-hand side on the photo, you can see the beautiful big Coptotermes mound that's there. These mounds can live for up to 100 years. So they can be very, very mature mounds. A little bit tricky to see, but you can see that there is some new mudding on the side of that nest itself. That gives us an indication of how healthy the nest is and that it's still got new activity moving through it. So some of these things in these trial sites, we don't want to knock out every termite nest that's there. So we have to be smart with how we utilize these areas. So pretty much what's happening from the beginning is that we've put a trial plot that runs out. So there was timber, and then there's timber sitting underneath all of these trial plots themselves. So as I was talking before, the photo on the left-hand side, and the coloration is different now. So black being cordon, being the bottom layer of cordon. That's what we're looking at now. So with these plot sites, so there's 10 plots sitting there, set up in exactly the same way as what the HomeGuard ones were, and just showing the interaction. So pretty much now we're at a 12-month basis where we check these trial sites. We lift every plot out. From that point, we replace the timbers that are underneath, and you can see the heavy interaction from Coptotermes to the actual base of the cordon material itself. So the way these plots are actually made up is they're two 300mm sheets with a joint in the middle. So we're checking a couple of things with the protection. This here, you can see a duct tape was used, which we don't recommend anymore, but it's still holding up in those conditions. So remembering it is very wet and a very arid situation for this trial site to actually be sitting in. I'm just going to go forward a slide because it's got a really interesting thing that's happening. So what we're looking at here is one of the trial sites that we had in that plot actually had heavy heterotermes in that area. So one thing we tend to find a lot of is the heavy heterotermes in these areas. They will tend to move through and interact with our trials first, followed by the likes of Coptotermes or Mastotermes darwinus in those areas. So looking here, we go, wow, there's termite leads tracking from the gauze straight up to where the HomeGuard's sitting, where the cordon's sitting. Remembering this trial site has been in the ground for 23 years, so it's had a lot of weather, a lot of interaction. With this trial, we actually took the option to take out the tube just to make sure that the mudding hadn't gone past the interaction point. So when we'd actually opened up the whole section, the mud lead had gone up to the edge of the cordon and had not gone past that in any way. So it's a good sign to show that it's working in those areas. Just in that photo in the middle, if you look just past my finger, you can see that brand new mudding that's sitting there on that mound that I was saying before. It's a really good indication of the health of that colony that's sitting in that area. Sorry, guys, too much talking for too long. Look, thanks, mate. Just looking here at what we have, I'll move forward to some of our home guard. So this is some of our prolonged trials that we had. So this is how we got a lot of the information to do with the flood documents and things like that to support the products. And both of our products are very similar in their nature. So with our home guard, we immersed it in water for 6 months with weekly stirring to base. And the beauty of that was we showed there's no significant loss of bifenthrin from that material into the water source. So it's a really good thing with bifenthrin, and that's one of the beauties, even with the liquid formulation. So Biflex Ultra, it binds so well to soil, and in the matrix we have with Home Guard, it is bound in that plastic and it's not leaching and disappearing. So it's a really good thing for the environment when we look at that. So looking at some of the residue studies, so this is basically Home Guard itself, where we've taken a swab on the surface to see how much bifenthrin is sitting there on the surface. And basically what's happened is we're not able to trace anything at the below 2 parts per million. So what that means is a low potential of sensitization when you're exposed to the Home Guard products. Doesn't mean that you guys need to go out and stop wearing your PPE. PPE is very, very important with all of these products. So just make sure with any of the products you're reading the labels, you understand those labels, and you look after yourselves at the foremost and the environment. So just be mindful of that when you're using any of our products. From me, I think that was pretty much it. So just one quick reminder just to go over and have, make sure that you've dropped in the chat your name for the lucky door prize. I will open it back up. I'll just jump onto this slide and I'll just try and jump out of here just so I can open up the chat. But I'll pass over to Mark for a second. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Mark?
Yep. Yeah, that's great, Dave. No, that's fantastic. It was good to go through that trial site protocols as well, because I think there's a lot of pest controllers never see that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And obviously you and I have had experience to that in the past, but quite often people don't know how much work's involved in that in the back end. So I think it's good to discuss that as well. There's a lot of money involved in doing those things. It's quite a costly exercise, and it obviously keeps the products up to date as well, which is good.
Yep.
So that's cool. So I'll just check the chat, see if there's any questions. I don't see any questions in the chat. If anyone's got any questions for David, please take yourself off mute and please just shout out if you can, or stick your hand up and we can get someone on if there's any questions. Just go back to...
If there are questions and you don't want to answer them in here, that's completely fine too. Please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer the questions for anyone as we move forward.
Yep. No, that's fine. I guess
a question done a great job. Yep, go.
I think so. Yeah, I think if there's no questions, that's good. It's always a good thing. So I guess with the two brands of the pre-construction, I guess you guys are looking at supporting both the brands of Cordon and Home Guard going forward. Yep.
We are, and there's a lot of things happening in the background, so it may not look like it at the moment, but we are working on how we consolidate the two brands and support them better within the marketplace. So we're revisiting warranty options and things like that to better support everyone. We have set up in place a few things to assist. So a lot of our homeowner inquiries and things like that won't necessarily be coming to our sales team. They'll actually be coming into our Envu Termite Protection Centre to answer those questions more frequently. So it's not something where someone's waiting for us to come out of a meeting or out of the car. They're actually going to be answered by someone who's in front of the computer at that time to look up the warranty and give the customer that information as well.
So is that like a dedicated call centre for the termite protection products? Okay.
Yep. So we're still there to support with technical questions, issues on site, but more to do with that kind of end user homeowner. They're the ones that will be going back into that site. So we're more dedicated to the actual people using the product, not the homeowners.
Yeah, that's fine. And I guess with just updates on your other range of things, obviously, you've got quite a big range between the two portfolios. I guess there's some of that's going to be rationalised as well.
Yeah, some will, and there is also development in the pipeline as well. So although we've got a large portfolio at the moment, there will be some rationalisation of some of our older products that potentially don't fit as well in the marketplace anymore. But it's more to make way and make sure that we're focused on the long term. So we want to be delivering, I guess, innovation to the pest control space. We've got a lot of very well trusted, tried products, and now we're looking at the future on how we can bring new active ingredients, new mode of actions, new I guess solutions to the market, and that's what we're working heavily on in the background.
Yeah, for that. That's cool. No problems. Any other questions from the floor? It's got a lot of people online, and I thought I might have at least one or two questions.
Yeah. I must have done a great job, or scared them with too much information.
I thought Peter would have a question.
He'll get me after, mate. Go, mate.
Brilliant, Dave. Absolutely brilliant. Again, thanks to you, thanks to Mark, and thanks to Envu for putting on a really great presentation. A lot to learn, and always good to rehash stuff, but also good to hear new stuff that's never the same. It's never one thing. Cheers, mate.
Yep. Agreed. Thanks, mate. And I'm a big believer that we're always learning. I think that's the most important thing. So
yeah, for sure. So just before we sign off, then we've just done the draw for the Lucky Door prize. So Sider just sent that through to me. So it's Leah Ross for Brunswick Byron Pest Control.
Beautiful.
Are you there, Leah?
I will get that organised for you, Leah. I will get Mark to organise sending me your details, and I'll organise a pack for you. So hopefully it'll come out soon, and I'll flick you an email to confirm when it's on its way too.
Yep.
Thumbs up on that.
I muted you.
Oh, thank you.
Are you there, Leah? Yeah, well done. That's cool.
How are you?
Yeah, that's cool. We'll pass your details on, and I think it's was that a promotion bag, Dave?
Yeah, so it's a promotion bag. It'll have a few goodies and things inside it as well. So yeah, just something to help you along your way.
Yep, just whatever Dave's got in the back of his car. So that's good.
Pretty much. It's all we had to wait a while to dig it out. So it was all in a warehouse. So I had to fight some people to make sure we had the good stuff.
To get it. No, that's
I thought it was going to be actually an actual door, so I didn't need one, so I didn't put my name down.
Thanks, mate. You've done well.
He's looking for a door.
There's always one, isn't there?
Oh dear. No, that's cool. No worries. Well, I think we haven't finalised next month's webinar, but the communication will go out within the next week or so. Thanks all for joining us today. As I say, if there's any other questions, send them through to Dave or I, and we'll catch up with you next month. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Globe. Have a lovely day.